Hello and welcome to this video. In the previous video, I showed you prompts for debugging these 10 prompts. And after exploring debugging, now it's time to see code refactoring. So debugging is the process of finding bugs or errors in your code, and code refactoring is the process of improving the quality or making the code more readable and simple. Talking of simplifying the code, we have the first one, simplify this code. So let's start by looking at this Python file. The objective is to print this star pattern. And we've written a function, print star pattern, which has these lines of code. Let's say you come across this code and you're given the task of simplifying this code. So one way is you go through this code yourself. Now this is a very simple example. It can be maybe 50 or 60 or maybe 100 plus lines of code. So in that case, you can use ChatGPT to simplify stuff. First, I'm going to copy this function, and then I'm going to use the noteboard Chrome extension, and I'm going to create a new note. And so that you can see things better, I'm going to increase the font size, copy all of this, change this to heading. So now you could see that this is the same function that we saw here, and we're going to add our prompt now. So let's get our prompt, simplify this code like that, and paste it here, and also make this heading 1. So now you can see everything simply. I can click accept. Now I'm going to copy it like that and back to ChatGPT. There we go. I've pasted my prompt, and let's see if Python gives us a simplified version. And it's interesting to see Python gives us just 3 lines of code as compared to our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's copy this code, and in VS Code, we're going to paste it right below this function. And for now, let's comment the simplified version. We're going to check how the previous code performs. And sure enough, it prints the star pattern as required. Now we're going to comment the original code, the complex code, and now we're going to uncomment the code that ChatGPT suggested. And sure, it gives you the star pattern. But notice, it gives you an extra space here. So well, for that, you can use your own refactoring, or you can further ask ChatGPT. But I'm going to do it myself. If I do it this way, there we go. And the extra line that was being printed is gone. So definitely you could see, you achieved the same thing in 3 lines of code as compared to 5 lines right here. So you just use ChatGPT to simplify a piece of code. Now this was a simple example. You may encounter code that is, or a function that is maybe 100 lines plus, a really complex code, spaghetti code, and you could use ChatGPT to simplify it. And speaking of the topic of complexity of code, here's another prompt that you can use to calculate the cyclomatic complexity of your code. Let's see this with an example. Here I have a Python function that apparently looks complex because it has so many branches, if and else if statements. In a very simple term, cyclomatic complexity increases when you have so many branches and so many if then else statements. We're not getting into cyclomatic complexity and its definitions. We just want ChatGPT to help us find the cyclomatic complexity for this code. So I'm going to copy all of this, and then I'm going to use the noteboard, and then I'm going to copy this from here, and I'm going to send it to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT came up with this example, or this result, and it says that the cyclomatic complexity is 7. And yes, that makes sense because we have 6 if and else statements along with the function call. And now, since you've seen how to calculate the cyclomatic complexity, we can also use ChatGPT to refactor the code to change the cyclomatic complexity to some desired level. So let's copy this prompt and back inside of noteboard. Notice I've added this prompt, refactored this code to change cyclomatic complexity to 2. So let's copy this, head back to our ChatGPT, and now let's paste this prompt. And let's see. And there we go. It gives us a function that seems to be quite interesting. We're going to copy this function and head back to VS Code. And let's paste that new function over here, and we're going to comment it. So now we're going to execute this code. So it's asking for an age, and this is the initial function. And for sure, it gives you the result. But now we're going to see the refactored version of it, the one that ChatGPT gave us. This one right here. And this is supposed to have a cyclomatic complexity of 2. There we go. Enter your age, let's say 32. And there we go. So you can see that with less cyclomatic complexity, your programs become easier to maintain. Since you're talking about refactoring, there are different paradigms or conventions in coding that help you keep your code maintainable. And one of the principles is the solid principles. And in the solid, you have S, that stands for single responsibility principle. So using this prompt, I'm going to show you a piece of code. Now I have a function inside of this script refactor.py. This function is simple. If you look at it, the name is sum. It takes in number 1 and number 2 and returns an integer. And you have 2 statements. The first one is creating a sum. The second one is creating a product. And then you're only returning the sum. So one glance at this function and you can see the only responsibility of this function should be to sum, to create the sum and return it, right? So this product is an extra responsibility. So clearly this function is violating the single responsibility principle. What we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and then I've created a prompt just like that. I've pasted the sum function and wrote this, refactored this code to comply with the single responsibility principle. And I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste this thing. And now let's see. There we go. It tells you to comply with single responsibility principle. We need to refactor the sum to have only one responsibility. And it's refactored the code to make the sum function do only one thing, that is return the sum of the 2 numbers. If you want to see a more detailed response, you can regenerate this thing. And now it would probably extract, as you can see, it's extracted it's created 2 functions. One was to calculate the sum, the second was to calculate the product. I think this is a more elegant solution because it takes both the cases. So over here, we're going to comment this thing, and there we go. So now you've just refactored the refactor.py using the single responsibility principle. Each of the functions have only one responsibility, and this makes your code, or makes these functions, easy to maintain. And since we've seen a lot of refactoring in VS Code, it's also time to ask ChatGPT to share 5 best practices for refactoring large and complex code bases. And let's see what ChatGPT comes up with. It's talking about starting with the plan, break it down, write tests, refactor in small increments, and then involve the team. So at this point, you can ask ChatGPT using the solid principles. There we go. Now it talks about the single responsibility principle, the open closed principle, the Liskov substitution principle, the interface segregation principle, and the dependency inversion principle. So you can read more about them, or because you're a ChatGPT ninja, you can take any of these and you can start asking as to what this is. You could start to say, tell me about, there we go. And it starts to tell you more about each of these principles. So there you have it, my friends. I shared a couple of refactoring prompts with you, and I showed you how to use them in your own code. There are a couple more prompts in here, and as a mini challenge, I want you to give them a try and see how you can tweak them or make some changes and then have your desired output, right? So this was code refactoring, and now I want you to join me in the next video where we're going to talk about algorithms and how you can use ChatGPT to work with algorithms. This would be the last section for ChatGPT prompts for programmers. So I hope to see you there.